Where does your favorite NFL team rank after week 1 of the 2024 NFL season? What's going on, football fans? It's Mitch here, back with my NFL Power Rankings, the first Power Rankings video of the 2024 NFL regular season. These are my rankings after week 1, entering week 2, from the worst, number 32, to the best. Let me know in the comment section below where you would rank your favorite team. Spike the like button, and don't forget to subscribe. If you're new to my power rankings, I never try to overreact, especially in a week 1 setting, but I'm also looking to make adjustments based on how the team is playing right now entering the next week. So things like Jordan Love getting injured play a massive role in my power rankings, and I'm adjusting it on a weekly basis. Let's get started, guys. Let's begin with the worst team in the NFL at number 32, the Carolina Panthers. I'm sure you're not shocked or surprised. Now, I was somebody that was believing the Panthers would improve this year, and I came across this game against the Saints, and boy, was I disappointed. Bryce Young is still really bad, and Panthers fans that were telling me he's going to be better, you have to believe in him, I was never a believer. And if you watch my content, you understand that. From day one, never been a Bryce guy, right? But I expected a little bit better, right? They brought in new offensive linemen. They've brought in Deontay Johnson. They drafted Xavier Legette. They brought in an offensive-minded coach in Dave Canales, who's apparently a quarterback whisperer, right? At least that's what we thought. But now it's only gotten worse. They lost by 37 points against what's considered a mediocre Saints team. Now, maybe the Saints are better than expected, but that's still really bad. I mean, they could have lost to the Chiefs or the Niners by 37, and we'd still be very concerned that they'd still be at number 32, right? But then on top of that, the Carolina Panthers lost their best player on their team, Derek Brown. So not only are they the worst team, one of the worst rosters, especially defensively, but they're also like no hope whatsoever. You watch Bryce Young play, the grading has come in on his offensive line. Actually, the 3 interior players, the 2 that they signed, had elite pass blocking grades. So you can't really blame it on the offensive line, according to Pro Football Focus, at least. It's Bryce Young. And at this point, like, he's just not good enough. He just doesn't have any trait that you look at and you say, this guy's going to be superb in the NFL. This guy's going to be average in the NFL. There's really nothing about him that separates him from somebody like Gardner Minshew. And even then, like, Minshew has had a lot more success. But just comparing them in terms of profiles, like, they both lack arm strength. They both are smaller. They are both not extremely quick or fast. There's a reason Minshew is kind of like a borderline backup starter, right? Bryce Young, he was a first overall pick, so we have high expectation, but this myth that he's this highly intelligent quarterback has not shown up in the NFL yet. So it's mostly to do with the quarterback. But I feel like at the same time, they just got nothing going. Lack of separation at wide receiver against a good cornerback group for the Saints. They got overwhelmed. They especially got down early. Big plays against the defense. J.C. Horn didn't exactly do his part early in the game. And then you lose Derek Brown. Your pass rush really is lousy, especially on the edges. Players are also injured there. So I just look at this whole thing and I think the quarterback's overwhelmed. I think the coach is young and overwhelmed. I think the team was not ready to play. They should get better as the season goes on, just in terms of they can't lose every game by 37 points. And we'll see this week, because the Chargers are not the most talented team, but they do have a more proven quarterback and a more proven coach, and they're 6.5-point dogs at home. So we'll see if the Panthers can show up at home this week, and maybe it looks a little bit better. But this team looked by far like the worst team in the NFL. By far, number 32. So the Panthers, worst team in the sport. At number 31, the New York Giants. The Giants were blown out by a team that I don't even think cracks my teens. Like, the Minnesota Vikings, we'll discuss them a little bit later on, but I do not see the Vikings as a legitimate playoff team or a legitimate divisional threat in the NFC North. I do think the Vikings are much better than the Giants, and I did pick the Vikings to beat the Giants, but I didn't pick the Vikings to confidently go into New York and destroy the Giants. Now that I look at it, it was probably one of the missed bets of the week, taking the Vikings, because I liked them the whole offseason. I just didn't have enough confidence in Sam Darnold. But you watch this Giants defense. They got pushed around by the Vikings in the run game and Aaron Jones. They weren't able to get a finger on Sam Darnold consistently enough. He was consistently completing the ball wherever he wanted to, whether it be Justin Jefferson, Naylor in the end zone, or Jordan Addison. It didn't really matter. Whoever was open, he was hitting them confidently. And the Giants, just that pass rush, the main area that they were sold on as being the strength of their team, did not show up. The secondary was atrocious. They couldn't cover me out there. And the offense, we already knew was going to be bad. I mean, they severely missed a playmaker like Saquon Barkley. The only player that really did anything at all was their rookie Malik Neighbors in the first week of their season. That's pretty, disappointing. Wan'Dale Robinson got a ton of targets and a ton of receptions, but he's not really a huge difference maker, right? He's a fine second, third, fourth option, really, but he's not going to change a game for any offense. Daniel Jones is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. I heard a stat that he has more interceptions than touchdowns since signing that contract. The offensive line is maybe a little bit better, but not by much. The Vikings defense thoroughly dominated the Giants, so the G-men just don't have anything inspiring offensively, very little in terms of big playability, very little explosive ability, especially now without Saquon. And the defense is just terrible in the back end, and they didn't get any pressure against a team that has Sam Darnold as their quarterback. So just really disappointing performance for the Giants all the way around. There's no outlook to me with this team where they're not a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. They just have nothing to lean on with this team where they can confidently suggest they're going to be a winning team at all. So yeah, this team just has nothing to them, and Daniel Jones would probably be sitting on the bench by about week 5. So at number 31, the Giants. At number 30, the Washington Commanders, who continually are ranked way too high. Before the season, I was not confident in the Commanders. They were one of the worst rosters, one of the worst teams in the NFL, in my opinion. And if you guys watch my content, you understand where they were ranked, very low, right? And they continually are ranked way too high. Again, I'm watching power ranking after power ranking, and I see them in the top 25. And I'm like, what makes you say that? Their defense is probably the worst I watched all week. I like Tampa's offense. We'll discuss Tampa later. I thought Baker played phenomenal. Evans, Godwin, tough to stop, right? But the Commanders' defense is horrible. They have no edge rush. Their best position on their defense is linebacker, and one of their guys is almost 40 years old, and Bobby Wagner. Their safeties are not very good. Their corners are pathetic. Pathetic. Horrible. Right? They're starting Forbes out there. He is horrible. So the Commanders just have no defense. What I actually liked about the Commanders in the game, I didn't think their offense was horrible. I will say that. It looks pretty mid, maybe a little bit below average. I thought Jaden Daniels, he showcased his athleticism, right? And that's the thing I liked about Daniels coming out, because I've been very negative with Daniels, mostly because I've largely been considering and comparing him to Drake May, who I think is a far better prospect, and I think that will show over time. But I feel with Jaden Daniels, what I liked about him was I don't think he had that floor of Bryce Young. And my difference in my comparison there is they're both skinny and they're both kind of smaller. Bryce is shorter, obviously. But with Daniels, he has the quickness, he has the speed, he has the athleticism, he can run. He can get himself out of dangerous situations. If he learns how to slide, he'll protect himself, right? And that will allow him to at least have one trait that makes him worthy of the draft pick. And I felt he showcased that athleticism, he showcased that rushing ability. But the problem right now offensively is they really only have one good receiver. Their scheme under Cliff Kingsbury is very, very, very conservative. They're running a lot of screens, a lot of bubble screens, a lot of quick throws, a lot of get the ball out of my hands. And the Bucs were just swarming everything, and they were just all over everything. And Commanders can't really run the ball. They don't have great running backs. They don't have a great offensive line. So really, their offense consisted of screens and a lackluster running game and the occasional like open throw down the field where there was a busted zone coverage or something. Like there was not a lot going on for the Commander offense, and it was very tough to watch the overall construction of Cliff Kingsbury's attack. I'm not a huge fan of their playmakers. I don't think anybody really stood out except for maybe Brian Robinson, who occasionally breaks a tackle and looks pretty impressive as a power back. But man, it was a lot on Jaden Daniels. And so I came across and came away from the game actually believing in Jaden Daniels a little bit more. I just feel like there's not a lot of help for him on the offensive line. There's not a lot of help from a scheme standpoint. There's not a lot of help at receiver. There's just not a lot that I like in Washington. The defense is terrible. Like this team is going to get blown out numerous times because they can't stop anybody and their offense is way too constricted and they don't have enough playmakers. So I think the Commanders are like bad, like really bad. The Giants probably have better coaching, but the Giants have less explosive ability. So I have them pretty interchangeable, but I have the Commanders at number 30. At number 29, the Denver Broncos. This is kind of like a ranking where I have it pretty in line with the preseason, but they were also not super impressive in week 1. I thought they hung in there as expected under Sean Payton, which made this a very dicey bet at 6.5, 7 because of the Sean Payton effect. And ultimately, they were getting blown out. I think it was like 29-13 or something like that. Early in the game, they were looking pretty good. But then later in the game, it was pretty decisive. The Seahawks were the better team at home with Mike McDonald's defense taking the ball away from Bo Nix a number of times, I think twice. And ultimately, the Broncos backdoor cover. And that's where, if you're betting this game, you probably were frustrated with Seattle. But Denver, they just look like a team to me that's not super talented. I actually was pretty impressed with their defense. I thought their defensive front looked the part. I really like their edge rushers. I think they're very underrated. Between Cooper, who I thought had a good game, Browning, right? Their defensive line is solid, with the addition of John Franklin Myers, and they've got DJ Jones and Zach Allen. Like, I think their D-line pretty much controlled most of the game up front when in pass rushing scenarios. Seattle's offensive line had a lot of issues, but they couldn't really cover the depth of Seattle's attack. Kenneth Walker broke some big runs against them, which they still struggle to tackle a little bit in space. Their corners are not very good besides Pat Surtain, who I thought had a pretty good game for the most part against DK Metcalf, which is not an easy task. And the defense just doesn't have a lot of secondary talent. You just see that as it is. Tyler Lockett had a huge day because of it. And then on the other side, Bo Nix is just not it for me, like never has been. I don't know if he'll ever be that. People are still high on him, but he turned it over a couple boneheaded interceptions. He barely threw the ball past the line of scrimmage. There was a number of throws to like Jaleel McLaughlin, like 5 catches for McLaughlin and resulting in 1 yard. Like that's how kind of terrible their downfield passing attack was, that the Ravens were all over the flat passes because they expected them and they knew they were coming. So Seattle just like all the way, like Mike McDonald's defense was just sitting on everything. And there's just not a lot to like about their playmakers. Like Cortland Sutton didn't do much. He had a lot of air yards, like they were trying to get him the ball. I believe he had a lot of targets, but honestly, like there's just nothing there. Like Javonte was disappointing. They didn't get a lot out of the younger receivers that you would have hoped for. They were overwhelmed a little bit. Like just from a talent standpoint, Seattle's a lot more talented, and Sean Payton can do his best, but there's just not a lot there. I actually thought Vance Joseph did a decent job in this game. I just don't think the Broncos are very talented. They don't have a great quarterback. There's just not a lot to like about Denver. I need to see more evidence that they're better than this. At number 28, the Green Bay Packers, and that's where I have the Packers at number 28. Packers are at number 28, man, because Jordan Love's hurt. And without Jordan Love, if they had a better backup, like let's say Ryan Tannehill came in and started for this team, I'd probably have them in the like fringe top 20 territory. But I think the drop from Jordan Love to Malik Willis is highly significant. Like it's absolutely huge. It's a game breaker, game changer. And then you combine that with a pretty underwhelming performance from this new defensive scheme and new defense, and it just is a bad recipe for winning games. Malik Willis is a terrible drop-back passer. He cannot get the ball where it needs to go. He could barely execute a Hail Mary. He actually, in fact, did not execute a Hail Mary. Their receiving core did look good. I liked pretty much across the board. Reed was phenomenal in the limited touches he got. He was extremely explosive, and I understand why they call him Deebo Samuel Jr. because he made people miss and made people look silly on that terrible turf. Watson scored a touchdown. That was nice to see. They need to get him the ball, I feel like, more. And I think they need to really feature Reed and Watson like a significant amount. I think they're a little bit too widespread in terms of the touches they're trying to design to these players. I think there's a little bit too much to everybody. I think they need to kind of like zone in on a couple guys, like one or two guys a little bit more. Jacobs kind of got going as the game went on, and I thought he looked really good in the second half. He looked terrible in the first half, but I thought he looked phenomenal in the second half. So that was nice to see. The O-line was a bit hit and miss overall, which is expected against a good Eagles front. The tackle situation was a little, I thought Walker really struggled in the game, in my opinion. A lot more Kraft than Musgrave, which is fair enough. Thought Kraft had a solid game. Dobbs made a couple catches here and there, right? Their receiving core definitely showcased it. Wicks was very quiet, didn't do much, which was maybe expected. He's the fourth receiver. The defense, though, was just very disappointing. Outside of the turnovers that they came up with Jair getting a pick and McKinney getting a pick, at least it's their top-end players that are making those plays. I thought that the linebacker Wilson played well. Devontae Wyatt had a splash play or two. I just didn't think everything came together. They struggled to tackle. They struggled to cover consistently. They struggled to get pressure consistently. They struggled in terms of their run fits, which was very, very irritating, especially if they're going to play the Colts. They're going to have similar issues that they had against the Eagles, given the scheme variety being very similar, and then also Hurts and Richardson being pretty similar, Saquon and Taylor being pretty similar, and the offensive lines. I think they're pretty much going to struggle in both of these first two games. So I think the Packers, they just need to kind of hone in on some things, figure out who they want to feature on offense, get Jordan Love back healthy. The defense needs to be better in terms of tackling, run fits especially. I thought they were definitely very flashy. They could have won the game. There were a lot of big-time plays. I think they struggled sloppy early. They could have definitely taken advantage of the game early and maybe would have came out the winner. It was a good team they played in an awkward environment on a bad field that maybe hurt the faster team at the end of the day. So I'm not really taking away too much from that in terms of the Jordan Love Packers, but the reason I ranked them so low is Malik Willis is legitimately a third-string quarterback, which just really give them like no chance of winning next week, in my opinion. So that's why I have them so low. I'm basing this off of entering week 2. At number 27, the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are a tricky team to rank after week 1 because the Las Vegas Raiders, I thought, could have won the game against the Chargers. A lot of people probably didn't even watch this game, which is fair enough. But I felt like they were really good on defense early in the game. I thought their pass defense overall looked really impressive for like the entirety of the game. I thought they threw Justin Herbert off a lot. Like Herbert looked bad in this game. And I think that was more because of the Raiders. I thought they did get pressure with Crosby. I thought Wilkins looked good. Like the D-line was as expected, as advertised. The secondary was tight in coverage. I thought the game plan defensively was solid. They allowed a couple explosive runs that kind of ended their day kind of disappointingly. But overall, the defense was as advertised. It was more so like the turnovers and the mistakes and the coaching and the management from this team. Antonio Pierce, for some reason, became like super conservative, and he decided not to go for it, decided to play it very conservatively. And maybe that's just the identity he wanted to kind of play into with the defense and a running game and all that. But when you're down in the fourth quarter with like 5 minutes left and you're on the positive 45, 43 yard line and it's 4th and 1, you got to go for it, especially if your identity is we're the new Lions, we're going to run the ball, we're going to bite your kneecap sort of deal, which I think is what the Raiders are trying to aim for here. And they don't even go for it on 4th and 1 with their offensive line and their rushing attack. It just doesn't make a lot of sense why they punted that. And I feel like they could have won the game right there. I mean, the weird thing about this game is Minshew made a terrible mistake fumbling the ball backwards. That was awful. That was a game-changing play. They also had I believe a fumble by Zamir White, which was hugely impactful. It was in Chargers territory, if I'm not mistaken. And, there was another interception end of the game, right? So 3-0 turnover margin. They could have won the game if they don't turn 3 of those things over, right? They very well could have won the game, and they missed a field goal. So just a lot of mistakes by the Raiders, and that's where the Harbaugh edge and the Herbert edge came into play. Like, Herbert wasn't great, honestly, but he just didn't make those mistakes. Minshew did make one mistake, or maybe even 2. The interception was kind of unlucky. Like, Mac batted the ball in the air. It was kind of crazy, but like the Raiders, I think their defense was good enough. The O-line looked decent. They ran the ball. Madison had a great game. He really had a good showing. Like Brock Bowers showed what he could bring to the table. Jacoby made a couple plays. Adams looked, like he was going to be pretty involved. Didn't have a huge game, but like overall looked the same. There wasn't a lot to really dislike outside of like the mistakes, the game management. The Raiders just got to get better in that area. But that being said, this was against a very underwhelming like Charger roster, which is why I still have them only at 27, because it just feels like they need to play perfect. They need to play mistake free. And I'm very disappointed in their coaching from the head coach position from Antonio Pierce. Not really the scheme on offense or the scheme on defense. I thought that was great. I just think the management of the team, and then like having a guy like Gardner Minshew, you just can't make that many mistakes. You can't not go for it when you need to. Those are things that are on the margins. And I thought the Raiders were very disappointing in that regard. So they blew that game, in my opinion, at number 27. At number 26, I have the New England Patriots. The Patriots, I moved up clearly in my rankings, and I wanted to put them a little bit higher. But, when I really think about this game for my team, it was a little bit like fortunate in terms of the Bengals made a couple of mistakes, and they definitely blew this game in some fashion or form. But I also feel like the Patriots were just the better team for a majority of the day. They dominated the first quarter. They dominated into the first half. They were up in this game, the entire game. The Bengals, I don't think, ever led in this entire game, right? The Patriots were able to play defense and run the ball. Ramondre Stevenson looked like a superstar in the game. There was a lot of positives coming from the Patriots in this game. I felt like their defense was as advertised. Even without Christian Barmore, I felt like their D-line stepped up. Keon White was phenomenal, 2.5 sacks, right? Forced fumble that didn't go their way. They got a big punch out from one of their best players in Kyle Duggar. They got what they needed to. Their special teams played really well. They knocked the ball out. They got another possession there. They were able to convert that to a 3. Now, if the Patriots want to continue to do this, I think they need more explosives out of their passing game from Jacoby Brissett and the receivers, which again is where I feel like Drake May would maybe be better for this team. If Drake May was in there, whether it be running the ball or throwing the ball especially, I think he would create more explosives. Now, maybe you don't have the same gamesmanship, the same game management skills that Jacoby has, but you just have so much more athleticism, so much more big plays. Now, I didn't think Jacoby was bad. I thought he missed 1 or 2 throws. I thought he played it conservatively, but I thought he made most of the plays that were there to be had. Like, he didn't really have to do that much, but he made a couple throws early in the game. He converted on 3rd down a couple times. He scrambled a couple times more than you would have thought. And he played very smart, and he understood that we have one of the best defenses in football. And, the Patriots pretty much shut down the Bengals running game. They forced everything underneath for the Bengals receiving game. They took Jamar Chase out of the game early on. Christian Gonzalez looked fantastic. Their secondary, I just feel like generally is fantastic. Like Jonathan Jones made a huge 4th down stop. Marcus Jones recovered the fumble from Kyle Duggar. Peppers was a presence out there. Duggar was kind of quiet, but he did punch that ball out when need be. Tavai and Bentley in the middle were phenomenal. Keon White, really good. Like, if they can continue to get good play out of the D-line, because I really feel like the back end of this defense from linebacker to safety to corner is really good. It's like, can they continue to get that D-line play like they did in this game? And Keon White, can he continue to be that like Pro Bowl level player? Because without Barmore, that's kind of what they're missing, right? But offensively, the O-line played a lot better than expected. And my overall takeaway was Alex Van Pelt, man. Like, Alex Van Pelt did a good job. He organized this offense. I felt like the blocking in the run game was very good for the most part. Like, the zone blocking schemes, it looked good to me. Like, it looked organized. Stevenson was able to cut back stuff and hit the right hole, and Stevenson looked dynamic. The receivers, I want to see somebody stand out a little bit more. It wasn't Douglas. It wasn't Polk, except for the separation charts kind of say that Polk was having a good game. He just didn't get the ball enough. I do wonder if this was a different quarterback, right? If Drake May was in there, maybe he would take a couple more chances to throw the ball to Polk, which is, again, where if the Patriots want to get to that next level and maybe they realize they can pull off these upsets and they want to kind of ease into the season with Brissett, but if they want to push that button to the next level, I feel like Drake is that button they can push. So I'm intrigued to see, even if they're winning, if they made that switch with Drake May, because they're probably going to lose one game here, whether it be Seattle or coming up to the Jets or Miami or the Niners, probably for sure. But like if Drake could maybe be the guy that kind of unlocks this team and actually makes them better than people expect, because the O-line wasn't bad at all. Like in terms of their pass protection, they really handled it fairly well. Hendrickson had a couple of pressures, but other than that, like it wasn't too outrageous. So for me, the Patriots looked better than I would have thought on offense, and it really only resulted in 16 points, and their defense was advertised, and they shut down, one of the best quarterbacks and one of the best receivers in football. So at number 26, the Patriots, they could honestly be higher. At number 25, the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans, kind of just a team that, a little bit lower on than entering week one, just because Will Levis was really, really bad. Like when you're playing that game, you can't have those mistakes. You can't have that, like, worst play of the week, Will Levis play that he had, right? Like, that was terrible. They lose the game because of two mistakes, like a punt block, the interception for a touchdown. That lost them the game. Thought their defense looked really good. Their defensive line dominated. They were the more physical team up front. Their cornerbacks gave them an edge against that receiving core of the Bears. Caleb was just not looking like a first overall pick talent, right? And the Titans did a good job, right? The defense for the Titans was really, really, really good. So that kind of allowed me to grow on them. But if they're going to get quarterback play like this from Will Levis, they're just not going to be very good this year. The offensive line in combination with that was not great either. So that's just what worries me. There's just like every other element, the receivers were getting open. There's definitely plays to be had. Will Levis missed them. Tony Pollard looked fantastic. The defense looked really good. They were on the road for this game and a first ever coaching start for Callahan. So for me, like every other element except for the O-line and quarterback was pretty on point. It's just that when your O-line and your quarterback are not very good, you're not going to be a very good team. So at number 25, I have the Titans. At number 24, the Cleveland Browns. This might shock some people that they're this low, but honestly, watching that game, this team was disgustingly bad. And the offense looked like the worst offense in the NFL. And it was because they have the worst quarterback in the NFL, maybe other than Bryce Young. But, I mean, Deshaun Watson was absolutely atrocious. And there's been Browns fans all offseason like, Mitch, you're underrating them. Mitch, they're very talented. You should be putting them in the playoffs. They're going to win the AFC North. Or, like Deshaun Watson is better than you think. He went 5-1 or whatever his record was last year. Like, no, guys, like he's bad. Like I don't just dislike him because of the off the field stuff. Like he's actively really, really fucking bad. Excuse my F-bomb, but it has to be said. Like he's bad, okay? So Deshaun Watson missed so many throws, so many. His accuracy is by far the worst I saw from any quarterback, including Will Levis. His pocket presence, he holds on the ball way too long. His timing is atrocious. Everything with Kevin Stefanski needs to be succinct. This is a West Coast offense at its heart. This is a Shanahan offense. This is a Kubiak offense. You got to be on point with your timing, with your drops, with your accuracy, where the ball's going. Amari Cooper looks frustrated, right? Like he might get traded. Good. Jerry Jeudy is not who they think he is. He's just not, okay? Ford is not a difference maker at running back. I've been saying that. He's not a difference maker. He's a fine player. He's a good, decent late round fantasy pick, right? Because Chubb's not there, but missing Chubb is the heart and soul of the offense. The offensive line really struggled to block the edges of the Cowboys, which was kind of expected. But it just feels like the Browns have no identity on offense. They're trying to run like this old, like Clemson type Watson attack. And then they're also trying to split that with the Stefanski under center stuff. And it's just not working. Like run Stefanski's offense. And if Watson's not fit to do that, put him on the bench and put Jameis Winston in because it's not the offense. We saw old man Joe Flacco come off the couch and execute and take this team to the playoffs and have Amari Cooper with a career season and have David Njoku with a career season who unfortunately got injured as well. He was playing great, but it's not the scheme. It's the quarterback. It's not the coaching. Like the defense was really good in this game, honestly. Like the defense gets a bad rap. This defense is going to, get probably berated by people because they lose this game and it looks like they allowed a lot of points, but it was the offense's fault. Like they only allowed like under 300 yards. I think Dak had like 160 yards. CeeDee Lamb had like 60 yards, which is not great for him. The run game, like the leading rusher was Zeke with 40 yards. Like the Browns defense was as advertised. They played really well. Myles Garrett made an impact when he could, right? Because The Cowboys were just in a position in this entire game where they could play it conservatively. They didn't have to push the ball down the field. They didn't have to drop back pass, right? Because Cleveland was never in control. Cleveland was playing from behind, chasing the entire game, and that's what happens when you have a bad quarterback. So the Browns defense was on their toes, on their heels all game. So it's just tough to win like that. And Cleveland looked absolutely brutal because their offense was absolutely disgusting to watch, and their quarterback was even worse than that. So at number 24, that's why I have the Browns. At number 23, I got the Los Angeles Chargers. Like I said with the Raiders, like the Chargers really didn't win this game. I thought the Raiders lost this game. I will say about the Chargers, I thought their defense looked maybe a little bit better than expected. Asante Samuel looked the part. I felt like the D-line overall looked a lot better than I would have expected. You know, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa really had great games on both sides. Morgan Fox came through. So I thought there was elements of the defense that I thought shined in this game, and that was what was really impressive. I actually felt like the O-line was fine. I thought in the run game they were pretty good later in the game to secure this victory. J.K. Dobbins was awesome. That was nice to see, right? I want to see more Palmer involvement. Ladd McConkey had a touchdown. That was obviously great for the confidence and for the future of this receiving core, but you can't keep putting Quentin Johnston out there. He's just not good enough to play at this level. He can't be out there. I don't understand why he's out there at all. Herbert's got to do more. He's got to be, I think, a little bit more aggressive. I think he's got to be a little bit better in big scenarios for this team, like the red zone and third down, if this team really wants to do something this year. It just felt like they were very run-oriented. They understood the game. They understood how to win this game. I get it. They didn't make the mistakes. And that's good enough against the Raiders. But will it be good enough against an average team? I just don't necessarily think so. So the Chargers, some good things, some bad things, some things that I kind of felt like we were going to see from this team. It's just we need more from this team if they're going to be more relevant than just stuck in that. They're not quite bad enough to get a high draft pick, but they're not quite good enough to be relevant in the playoff chase. So at number 23, the Chargers, at least Harbaugh won his first game. That is good. At number 22, I want to talk about the Browns again, obviously. The Arizona Cardinals at number 22. The Cardinals, I have them at 22 ahead of teams like the Chargers because I just thought there was more from the offense and things like that. And that's what provided a pretty strong floor for me with this team is that Kyler and the offense was going to be pretty fantastic. And in the first half, the Cardinals offense was pretty fantastic. They didn't get stopped really at all. The Bills defense did not force a punt. This was a tough environment for the Cardinals to go into. They're one of the worst teams in football last year. They had to go into Buffalo to face Josh Allen, and they made this thing really competitive. They jumped out. They got a lead. It went down to the wire. I think that Gannon has this team playing hard, and there's clearly a belief with this team because they understand their offense is really good. Greg Dortch, I thought, had a good game. James Conner was pretty solid. Kyler played well in the first half. He did miss that throw to Harrison at the end. Harrison was very underwhelming, but perhaps that was to do with the game plan from McDermott and because of how good the secondary is in Buffalo at corner specifically. But I just feel like we need more out of Harrison. We need more out of McBride. But, the first half was good. Then the second half came around and it kind of looked like they just couldn't stop Josh Allen, which is fair enough. That happens. Josh Allen is a beast. It's fair enough. The Cardinals are not good enough on defense. We knew they were arguably the worst defense in football. That's how I ranked them. That's just how it's going to be for this team. They're going to have to win shootouts. They're going to have to be more consistent on offense in the second halves of games. They're going to have to get a run game going more consistently. Kyler's going to have to step up and make those plays when he needs to make them. And Marvin Harrison is going to have to be better, right? So at number 22, I saw enough flashes for the Cardinals. I just need to see it come together for full 4 quarters, and maybe they can start actually upsetting these teams. At number 21, the Chicago Bears. I have the Bears at 21. It's almost opposite of the Cardinals. Their defense showed up, but their offense didn't. And I kind of have just more belief that the Bears have the talent on offense than the Cardinals have the talent on defense, if that makes sense. So Caleb kind of looked like what we saw in the preseason in terms of the bad that we saw from him. Not a great completion percentage. Too many plays where he's running around, floating around, trying to make something happen, not making it happen. The pass protection being kind of lost because of it. 90 yards is terrible for any quarterback in any game. They just lack a physicality on offense. They lack a punch you in the mouth style. Like, their run game kind of obviously is very finesse. Like, you look at their running backs, DeAndre Swift, he's a pass catcher. Like, Khalil Herbert's very small. Like, they didn't have a lot of push in the run game at all. Their receivers couldn't really get the ball from Caleb. Caleb was a bit flustered against this Tennessee defense. And they really won this game because their defense and their special teams, which is classic Bears. But I think what we saw from the Bears is that they have a pretty good defense. Like, their secondary is very talented. Johnson made plays. Stevenson made plays. I think their secondary can hang, and their front is very sound against the run. They're not going to get bullied at all. They're going to be very sound there. And Sweat's going to have to tee off as a pass rusher. We also saw the opposite edge who they traded for, Taylor, I believe, from the Seahawks. He had 2 sacks, so that was awesome. But the Bears, like, overall, I just feel like they're going to grow on offense, get a little bit better. They need to find what their identity is going to be, but it just wasn't good signs in week 1. It wasn't good vibes. It didn't look like a team that I picked to go to the playoffs, and it doesn't look like a playoff team to me. But it looks like a team that their defense can keep them in there until their offense kind of figures it out. And if it comes together, this could be a team that ascends down the stretch. So at number 21, the Bears. At number 20, the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings were surprisingly dominant in week 1. Like, the Vikings do have great coaching under O'Connell and Flores, but they look like a different level of talent compared to the Giants. Like, their D-line absolutely, utterly dominated. Dallas Turner got a sack, I believe. Andrew Van Ginkel was huge in this game. He had a sack and a pick 6. Shout out to Van Ginkel, my guy. Obviously, they have talent up front. Like, they suffocated the run game of the Giants. They really did a solid job on Neighbors. They didn't really allow any explosive plays in the game. Their safeties continued to show out the way they did last year. Harrison Smith had an interception. They were able to make the big play at the right time. And what I thought was a key difference between the Vikings defense last year and this year, they really didn't blitz as much. They focused a lot more on a 4-man rush, which was nice to see that they could be productive on defense without blitzing a ton, because a lot last year was smoke and mirrors from their defense, right? But this year, it feels like if they can maintain a little bit more of that 4-man rush, then they're going to be just a better defense in general, a more versatile defense. They can pull out those blitzes and dynamic 8-man coverages, probably in unique settings, maybe like this week against the Niners where they're clearly outmanned and outgunned. But against teams like the Giants where they're just better than them, they can maybe play a more traditional style, which was nice to see that kind of mix from Flores. Now, on the other side, O'Connell called a great game. Darnold looked the part. He was accurate. He was on point. His timing was good. I thought Darnold actually looked like a top 20 quarterback in this game, which was nice to see. The O-line was very good. They protected Darnold very well against what is expected to be a great front seven. Aaron Jones looked like Aaron Jones, which is a great sign. Now, Jordan Addison did get hurt, and without TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, it's going to be very tough to beat the Niners at home, but you're not expected to. You're an underdog. If you hang in there, I think that's a good sign. Justin Jefferson's Justin Jefferson. He scored a touchdown. That's great. Need to, I think, find a way to get him a little bit more involved in the offense than they did in week 1, but they were ahead the whole game, so, that is what it is. So, yeah, I just thought the Vikings were just very well schooled, very prepared. Darnold was crisp, and if Darnold plays like that every week, this is going to be one of the most surprising teams in the NFL this year. At number 19, the Atlanta Falcons. I've downgraded the Falcons significantly after that week 1 performance. Kirk Cousins lacked any mobility to move inside, outside the pocket. The offense just didn't do much outside of, Kyle Pitts' touchdown and, Bijan really catching the ball in the backfield, running the ball. Like, they didn't really have a good game. Drake London lost his matchup with Joey Porter Jr. The O-line got dominated for the Falcons against probably the best front seven in football in the Pittsburgh Steelers, but Atlanta's O-line is supposed to be like the core of their team, and it looked very overrated in pass protection in week 1, so that's very disappointing. They need their O-line to play well because this is not like the best group of weaponry in football. Cousins is going to need time to work this scheme and work this offense. Now, it was his first game off an Achilles. It was the first game on a new team in a new setting with a bunch of new players. I get it. He didn't really play in the preseason. They're going to be slow to start the year, and that's a tough Steelers team, a tough team to beat with a great defense, arguably the best in football. So it wasn't a shocking loss, right? But their defense, They kept them in it. I didn't think they were great, though. And in key moments, they allowed the Steelers to move the ball, right? Justin Fields moving the ball isn't ideal. And I think the big signs that I didn't love from the Falcons, they did a decent job against the run. Najee Harris didn't do too much. But George Pickens did whatever he wanted in the key situations that he needed to against A.J. Terrell. They lost that matchup. Pat Freiermuth got the ball a few times. That's their other option that they're going to throw to, so Pickens and Freiermuth got the ball quite often, right? And then Fields was able to run a little bit. They just didn't do the extra that they really truly needed to steal this game in a truly defensive battle. And lucky for them, they were very good in the red zone, forcing a bunch of field goals, but they need to be better within the 20s. So from 20 to 20, I should say. So to me, Falcons just not good enough on either side, in my opinion, against a team that is very beatable in Pittsburgh, but they do have their things that you really like about Pittsburgh as well. So at number 18, we've got the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts are tricky because I thought their offense looked phenomenal in big, explosive moments. Richardson, that throw he made to Alec Pierce was different. That was insane, right? And Richardson showed off his rushing ability, his speed, his explosiveness. He looked powerful. He looked strong. He looked like, Cam Newton 2.0, right? The O-line, I thought, was solid. I didn't think they really got the run game going the way they wanted. It kind of caused some inconsistencies for them. I felt like overall, Richardson, whenever he was forced into kind of a third down scenario, he wasn't the best. But it was just those explosive scenarios that they were able to hit that really kept them in the game and kept them relevant in this game. They were clearly outgained. They were clearly out first downed. Every stat goes to Houston in this game. Houston was clearly the better team. But Colts showed enough signs, enough explosion on offense that makes me believe there's something there, especially with time where the Colts can grow as an offense and Richardson can continue to get reps and Steichen can continue to hone in. But again, Steichen proves how good of a play caller, how good of a schemer he is against, I think, a pretty good Texan defense. Now, defensively is where I'm really just not happy about this team. I kind of feel and I would have been higher on the Colts if they had changed their defensive coordinator, changed their defensive scheme, added a couple corners. This is partly on Ballard. This is partly on Steichen. This is partly on whoever is making those decisions for coach and personnel, right? It should be Ballard and Steichen. Now, I think that Gus Bradley's just, his defense is outdated. It gets exposed against good quarterbacks. It gets exposed against good OCs. There's just too many times they got gashed in the running game, which is an unexpected thing. Mixon was getting 4 yards before contact, regularly. And then Nico Collins is making too many big plays because you don't have a corner that can cover them. They're getting out-schemed in the red zone. Stephon Diggs is getting open. It's just not good enough on defense. The scheme is not good enough. If not for their defensive line, they probably wouldn't have made a single stop in this game. Their defensive line played well. They sacked Stroud 3 or 4 times in this game. They got pressure after pressure after pressure, but they just couldn't get to Stroud. Stroud's just that good. And I understand that, but they've got to be better, in the back end. They've got to be better coordinated on defense, in their secondary, in coverage. It's just not good enough. And then their run defense was terrible. So not only was their coverage bad, but their run defense was bad. They were just consistently gashed all over the field. And, again, if not for Buckner and Pay and these guys, they would have gotten absolutely lambasted. It would have been a 50-point game for the Texans. So, yeah, the defense is really discouraging. But the offense is explosive. The offense is fun. And I did hear that Juju Brents is also out for the year, so that doesn't help their secondary. They need to go out and sign some guys at corner. They've got a real issue right now. But the offense keeps them kind of relevant. I feel like they can win some shootouts. I feel like if their D-line can dominate the matchup on defense, then they've got a chance to beat even the best teams in the league. It's just that the back end of their defense and the defensive scheme is so bad that I don't think they can be in that top half of the league territory. So at number 18, the Colts are a weird one. At number 17, I have the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks, I think they kind of did their job. They did enough to win this game. It didn't look as pretty as I would have hoped. I just think it was mostly to do with the offensive line, which does worry me entering week 2 on the road against the Patriots. Like, that could be a really bad matchup for them in that defense, considering that New England has a secondary that can actually cover Seattle. So that could be a really tricky one. But Seattle's defense mostly looked the part. They mostly dominated the way that we expected them. They got a couple of turnovers. They won't be faced with a good offense this week. So can Seattle protect Geno well enough? Their playmakers can come through with a couple of plays. Walker with an explosive run. He was excellent in week 1. Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf in this next couple of weeks. They need to figure out the O-line. They lost George Fant. The defense, though, made big plays, tackled well, felt like they were playing a Mike McDonald defense. And they've got ballers out there. Like the D-line, Leonard Williams played fantastic. Julian Love played well, right? We saw the combination of Witherspoon and Reek Woolen. So Seattle's got a defense. It feels like they've got enough skill talent on offense. Although I wasn't super impressed by the scheme or anything. It's just that the offensive line could really be an Achilles heel of an otherwise pretty darn good football team. So at number 17, the Seahawks. At number 16, the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers won a game that was classic Pittsburgh. They played phenomenal defense. They won the turnover margin. They won the turnover battle. And TJ Watt dominated. And they did enough on offense. That's basically the Steelers' formula for the entirety of the season, for last season, for the year before that. Ever since Ben has retired, this team has been defense, 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 terrible quarterback play, and just overcoming that. And I don't think the O-line looked too bad. That's nice. That's a good sign. Pickens looked like he should, right? They got the ball to the playmakers they should get the ball to. Jaylen Warren, I think, needs to be more involved moving forward, but Najee got the ball a ton. They grinded the game away that way. They protected their quarterback from drop-back pass through their running game. Arthur Smith did what he wanted to do. Freiermuth got the ball. Pickens got the ball. That's what we expect. They need more out of wide receiver too. They maybe need to make a move there if they want to be serious about this season. Defense is phenomenal, though. They've made another move in their secondary. I believe they brought in Terrell Edmonds, their old friend, to add some depth to their secondary. But Jackson looked good at corner. I felt like Porter played really well. The linebackers as advertised and the front as advertised. And TJ Watt, man. So at number 16, the Steelers, they're right in that fringe playoff. They just need to continue to grind away 18-10 games, which isn't the most fun, but it gets the job done. At number 15, the New York Jets. I actually am not going to punish the Jets that much for their loss. I expected it. I was one of the few people that expected the Jets to get dominated against the Niners. And that's what happened. Now, I didn't expect them to get pushed around quite to the degree that they did on defense because the Jets are a good defense. There should be a top 3 defense. There's no excuses. But it is Kyle Shanahan in week 1. Again, it's the best offense in the league. Clearly, the Niners are the best offense, right? So this wasn't a good matchup for them, right? It's Shanahan. He knows Saleh really well. Anybody with a mind about football should have known that. But what I was actually encouraged by was the Jets' offense didn't look that bad. I thought Rodgers looked clean in terms of his throwing motion, his accuracy, his arm strength. It was there. There was enough there for me, right? If they can get Mike Williams going a little bit more, along with what we saw from Allen Lazard with the 2 touchdowns, and I know one of them was kind of in garbage time, but that's enough of a 1-2-3 combination. Garrett Wilson made some really nice plays in this game. Breece Hall didn't have his best game, started with the fumble. He didn't really do anything on the ground, which they need to get more out of their ground game if they want to be a good team this year, a legitimate playoff threat. But I actually liked how Rodgers controlled the game. I liked the play calling for the most part from Hackett. I liked the utilization of the different formations and the motion. It wasn't McDaniel, it wasn't Shanahan, it wasn't McVay, but it wasn't bad. It actually looked from a scheme perspective better than I would have thought or considered. So the offense actually had me believing a little bit. The O-line wasn't that bad, right? They were playing a great pass rush on the road. It wasn't terrible. It's just the defense got manhandled against the best offense in the league, and they got outpossessed. They got ran down their throat, and that's discouraging, right? And Sauce got hurt during a portion of the game. He came back, but their linebackers are great. They need their defense to play like their elite defense to win these games, and they just didn't. So, but again, it's understandable. So it's a start. I don't think the Jets looked as bad as people think. I just think the Niners are that good. So at number 15, I have the Jets. At number 14, Jacksonville. Jacksonville should have beat the Dolphins. If not for a Travis Etienne fumble, I think they beat the Dolphins. Now, what I was very encouraged by with Jacksonville was their defense. I think Ryan Nielsen, again, I've been saying it all offseason, most underrated defensive coordinator in football. He showed out in the first half. Like, they didn't allow a single point to Miami until like 1 minute left in the first half. And then eventually Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle happened, and Tua was hitting dimes, and, Trevor Lawrence didn't play good enough for what they pay him for. And, Jacksonville fans have been unsubscribing from me because I think Trevor Lawrence is overrated and not playing to the contract. And factually and statistically, that is a correct analysis. The offensive line didn't look good either. But again, if you're an elite quarterback, if you turn on the Texan film and you turn on the Jacksonville film and you watch CJ Stroud play against the Colts pass rush, who was all over him all day, and you watch the Ram offensive line against the Lions pass rush and you watch Matthew Stafford, that's what we're expecting out of Trevor Lawrence, and he has not hit that level, right? He has not hit that level. Now, there were some drops, things like that, whatever. You got to be better. Now, Tank Bigsby looked like a relevant element of this offense. He looked just as good, if not better, than Travis Etienne, so they might have a 1-2 punch there. Doug Peterson, again, idiotic fourth down decisions. That's going to happen. That's kind of his MO. That's who you have in your coach. That is what it is. His offense got to be better, right? Press Taylor got to be better, but like Brian Thomas looked good. That's good. Other than that, I mean, defense did enough to win. They held the Miami Dolphins in Miami to 20 points. You've got to win that game if you're Jacksonville. You're not, Bradley Chubb's not playing for Miami. Like, you got to win that game. And they just didn't do enough from the quarterback spot. They didn't do enough on offense to win this game. And that's point blank, period. But that being said, it was a tough game to go and win. It's in Miami. It's week 1. It's against McDaniel, Tyreek, Tua in the first week, where Miami is a challenging team to play from a scheme standpoint, from a game plan standpoint. I thought they did an excellent job stopping the run game. That was huge for them. But Jacksonville at 14, I think that's pretty fair. At number 13, the New Orleans Saints, who absolutely decimated the Carolina Panthers. And the Saints were very low on my previous power rankings. I think, we're probably not going to see the Saints be this good for the rest of the year. But I've got to give them their flowers at this point, right? Like, their defense, we know, is really good when they're healthy. And that's what showed in this game. Like, they didn't allow the Panthers to run the ball. They forced everything through Bryce Young. They made them look tiny. And their corners played fantastic. Alontae Taylor had 3 sacks. Shout out to him. Marshawn Lattimore did his job against Deontay Johnson. Adebo. Those guys played really well. DeMario Davis calling out the defense. They dominated. On the other side, Derek Carr was Derek Carr at his best. He was efficient. He was accurate. He was on time. He made explosive plays early in the game, and he felt protected, and he played well. When Derek Carr is protected, he plays well. Their run game was better than expected from Alvin Kamara, and they pretty much moved the ball up and down the field against this Panthers defense. So the Saints looked dominant. Now, we have to see them against better competition. We'll learn more about them against the Cowboys. We'll learn if they're actually legit this week. So at number 13, the Saints. At number 12, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, you have to understand, I had the Bengals as a top 5 team before the season, and we know that the Bengals are always bad, like legitimately always bad at the start of the season. So I'm not going to take too much away. Like, there's a number of people commenting, the Bengals, most overrated team in the league. I told you this and that. Like, the Bengals are always like this at the start of the year. Now, here's the thing with the Bengals. Week 2, they play the Chiefs, the team that they always get up for and they always play competitively. Now, I'm not calling for a Bengals win or anything like that, the way they played against the Patriots. But if they go in there and they play toe-to-toe with the champs, I'll consider them to be, again, like what we more so expected from the Bengals, which is a really good offense and a defense that's opportunistic and well game planned and well sorted. Now, what we saw from the Bengals in week 1 was a team that was not prepared, a team that was not prepared for bully football from the Patriots offense, not prepared to tackle Ramondre Stevenson. I actually felt like their run defense, especially in the second half, was actually very good. It's just that they couldn't tackle number 38 for the New England Patriots. Like, they legitimately could not tackle the young man. So that was a problem. And early in the game, they couldn't get off the field on third down when they needed to against Jacoby. So that's bad. But they, at the end of the day, only allowed 16 points. And at the end of the day, when you study this tape, they probably win the game if the tight end, what's his name, Hudson, doesn't fumble the ball entering the end zone. If like Kyle Duggar doesn't punch the ball out right there and the Patriots recover it, the Bengals probably win the game, honestly. Or at least it comes down to like a last second drive from Jacoby where they get a field goal and win. Like either way, it's going to be that close. But what I was disappointed in the Bengals was their last like 5 minutes of the game. The defense could not make a stop when they needed to against Stevenson. And the offense didn't really even like put together a drive where they were getting anywhere close to scoring points. That was severely disappointing. I felt like their O-line actually played better than people thought it did. You know, other than Keon White, it felt like they had everything handled. Their run game looked kind of pretty bad, but that's kind of what we expected. Jamar Chase was not utilized well. I felt like the biggest issues from the Bengals were the general defense stopping the run and just like not making key plays, and then the offense, just the scheme, like the vanilla nature of their offense. And, you know, it wasn't really Joe Burrow. Like, to me, honestly, like there wasn't a lot of explosives from him, and he was a little hesitant. But to me, it was more so the scheme of the offense. Like, the Patriots just completely outcoached them on defense and completely outplayed them. They looked more prepared. They completely outschooled them. Gerard Mayo completely outclassed Zach Taylor. And that was the biggest issue. So I'm just believing this thing will get better for the Bengals. I think it will look closer to what we expect. So, and I'm expecting that as soon as this week. So at number 12, the Bengals. At number 11, Tampa Bay. I think a lot of people will have them in their top 10, and that's totally understandable. I just think that the Commanders are really bad. And that's kind of where I'm going to hit the pause button for a second. Like, Tampa's defense got beat up in this game. Like, their secondary, I'm worried about that, especially against the Lions. Like, I think after this Lions game, people are going to readjust their thoughts on Tampa after this week because, like, they're probably not going to stop the Lions very much. Like, Tampa's pretty good against the run, but the Lions can run it on everybody, and I don't know if they have the secondary to cover the Lions in this game. It's going to be very challenging for them. I do think Tampa can move the ball on a lot of teams, though. Their offense looked really good. Like, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans looked at peak levels. Like, McMillan looked like he could make some plays. White and Irving looked dynamic. Right? They have a number of weapons they can go to in a number of scenarios. And Baker looks like the most underrated passer in football. Like, he's making decisive decisions. His arm strength, his touch, all of it's good. Like, Baker, even his escapability from pressure was excellent. Like, I actually felt like Washington at times won the battle on third down up front, but they weren't able to sack Baker, and he extended plays and made some plays with his legs and then his arm. But, you know, Tampa, I think they're going to be more of an offensive team this year than people would expect. I think they're going to put up points regularly. I just kind of am concerned about the state of the defense. You know, Kalijah Kancey didn't play, so that's pretty big, but the secondary, like Antoine Winfield is a stud, and he's probably going to be out a couple weeks. So they're going to play a legitimate team on the road this week. It's going to be challenging, but if they can hang in there, I won't really dock them too much. At number 10, the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams really impressed me, and basically I think I had them at 11 or 12 like before the season started, so I haven't really moved them up too much. Obviously, they lost Puka. Their tackles were injured. The Rams really impressed me from Matthew Stafford, obviously. I mean, I'm always impressed with Stafford. I've always been a Stafford guy. He's been one of my favorite quarterbacks of all time. He just continues to shine in terms of like his intelligence, his decision-making, the speed at which he gets rid of the ball, the ability to read defenses. Now, he did have a couple bad mistakes in terms of he should have thrown like 2 or 3 picks. He threw 1. He should have thrown 2 or 3, but when you throw the ball 60 times almost, like that's probably going to happen a few times. And I just think that McVay had a very smart game plan. He kept the ball in Stafford's hands. It was a lot of quick throws, kept them out of second and third and long, allowed the offensive line to play, you know, quick pass block snap, get the ball out of your hands. It was very like Tom Brady versus the Ravens 2014 AFC divisional round. If anyone recalls that game, Belichick was basically like, we're not running the ball in this game. And that's basically what Sean McVay said. You know, Kyron Williams had his plays. He scored his touchdown, I think, but Stafford, it was mostly on his arm, and Cooper Kupp looked like, you know, prime Wes Welker out there just running like 5 to 7 yard routes and catching 12 passes. Kupp did not look very explosive. Like, he didn't have a lot of plays down the field, but he was just a wizard underneath, which in that type of game plan, that's what's needed. I thought Tyler Johnson looked fantastic. Demarcus Robinson was fine. Kyron, you know, nice to see him getting the workload of a true stud, which he is. The defense was really what impressed me, though. I thought the defense played really well against a really well-coordinated offense. Like, I thought the Rams' defensive scheme was sound in terms of clogging up the middle of the field, forcing Jared Goff to go to the perimeter. I thought they did a good job early against the run game of the Lions. They didn't get overpowered, but they just wore down. Like, their talent clearly showed at the end of the game. They wore down, and they weren't able to quite hang with the Lions in those big moments in overtime in the fourth quarter. Jameson Williams was a problem for them. Tre'Davious White's completely cooked and washed. But at number 10, the Rams, with the coach, with the quarterback they have, with Cooper Kupp playing that level, if Puka comes back healthy, they'll be flirting with that playoff spot. It's just a matter of, do they have enough talent? Will they stay healthy on offense? And does their defense have enough talent to beat these better teams? And that's just my problem with them. At number 9, the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, Josh Allen is just unreal. He's just amazing. Like, honestly, he could win MVP this year, and he probably should have won it last year, if we're being honest. Like, the guy is insane. He's his whole team. I don't think this team wins 3 games without Josh Allen. He's just sick. Like, that hurdle touchdown was incredible. I thought the O-line for the Bills played pretty well at the end of the game. I thought the offense, a little inconsistency early on, but they got it going. The Cardinals showed a lot of respect to Dalton Kincaid. They were like doubling him a few times unexpectedly. Like, thought Allen was finding his check downs, finding his alternative receivers. What I liked from the Bills was the plethora of targets that got play here. Like Cook got the ball. I believe Davis got a couple catches, or Ty Johnson. I couldn't quite recall. Knox made some plays. Shakir scored a touchdown. Coleman made some plays. What's his name? The special teamer Hollins got a touchdown. So, like, a lot of different guys were involved, which is nice to see, right? So that's great for their offense. I thought their offense really cooked in the second half and was pretty much unstoppable. And Josh Allen's a glitch in the red zone. And then you have the defense, which was really bad in the first half. And then they started to stop the run. They started to get some pressure, and their D-line started to tee off, and Greg Rousseau is a superstar. He had 3 sacks. Now, entering this game against Miami, which is a huge game, Teron Johnson's injured now, and on top of Matt Milano, that's a huge part of the middle of their defense. It's going to be real tough for them to get stops against Miami. But if their pass rush can play really well, that's going to be the key for them, along with Josh Allen going nuclear, which is not too far from imaginable. So at number 9, the Bills, they don't quite have that level of talent they used to have, especially on defense. But with Josh Allen out there, they've got a chance against anybody. At number 8, the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins didn't play their best game, but I think that in some ways that's good. Like, the fact that they didn't play their best game but still came through, at home, coming from behind. Tua was able to prove himself against a good defense on the fourth quarter. Like, that's good enough for me in week 1. Like, Tyreek and Waddle both went over 100. A-Shane had like 7 catches. Their run game was very disappointing. Their offensive line's probably a big part of that. They couldn't get any push against Jacksonville's D-line, but pass game was really good, and it's nice to see Tua have to carry a game script like that. That's nice to see. Now, they do need to score more than 20 to beat most good teams this year, though, so that's my concern entering the Buffalo game. Now, the defense, I think, was actually better than advertised in this game, especially in the second half when they needed to make plays. That was nice to see. They'll be healthier down the stretch, but I think they've got the talent all the way across the board. It's a matter of the run game playing better, getting a hotter start, Tyreek not getting arrested. All those things will help them. There's really not a lot to say about this team. I just felt like they didn't play well in the first half. They played well in the second half. There's really not a lot to say, but their explosiveness is still there. At number 7, the Philadelphia Eagles. I was really impressed with the Eagles' offense from like a coordination standpoint, from a scheme standpoint. I felt like the Eagles' defense was really bad again. Like, I did think they looked faster. I did think they looked hungrier, let's say. Like, they were tackling better, things like that to a degree. But I don't think the run defense is, like, it's spotty. In the first half, it was, like, good. But in the second half, it wasn't. I felt like they just couldn't cover, like, Reed or Watson and, or Dobbs in, like, when they really needed to. It felt like they weren't great in coverage. And then their linebackers definitely not great, but I did think Bond played well. That was a nice sign for them. I thought Nakobe Dean looked better. Quinion Mitchell looked really good. I don't know. This thing will grow. It will get better under Vic Fangio, of course. I don't think the pass rush is as good as it used to be. That's also concerning. It's just like the defense, there was flashes of good, but overall, like, they didn't play well. And then the offense was really good, except Jalen Hurts was terrible. So, like, they were able to win a game in which their quarterback played really bad and their defense didn't play that well. So that's pretty crazy. But, Saquon was awesome. He looked like prime Saquon, like pretty close at least. Like, he used to move at a different speed. And in that game, he showed that explosion was close to back. And you could tell the energy that team gets from him. A.J. Brown was A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith was fine. Goddard made some plays. So I think the O-line looked as advertised. Becton looked phenomenal. So the Eagles look like a team that can score on a lot of teams. It's just I'm concerned about Hurts, and I'm concerned about the defense. Hurts was really bad. Now, Kellen Moore, that's a plus, though. Kellen Moore was really good. Very big improvement from last year. At number 6, Dallas. Dallas's defense was phenomenal against the Browns. And I know the Browns have a terrible offense and Deshaun Watson is unplayable, but Parsons and the D-line thoroughly dominated a undermanned O-line. They stuffed the run, and Zimmer's defense looked really good. They looked dynamic. They looked, very hungry out there. The turnovers were there. Trayvon Diggs looked back. The safeties looked great. I thought Donovan Wilson played phenomenal. Eric Kendricks didn't look too old. That's a good sign for their linebacking core. Also Overshown, I believe, the kid out of Texas that they drafted 2 years ago that got hurt last year. He looked good. But yeah, if the defense plays like that, this is a playoff team for sure. I expected regression from this unit, but they played legit. And the offense, I need more out of the running game. I need better out of the O-line, but CeeDee Lamb is just uncoverable, and Brandon Cooks looked like Brandon Cooks, which is a good sign. Jake Ferguson's hurt. I don't know about the offense. Dak looked really good. I thought that he was making a lot of decisions for the most part, that just high-level quarterback play decisions. He understood that he didn't need to put up 40 to win this game. So it was nice to see from Dak, but I don't know. A lot of it to me was more about the Browns being terrible. But I was very impressed with the defense. I will say that. Entering the top 5, the Baltimore Ravens are at 5. They did outgain the Chiefs, but I kind of felt like they should have gotten blown out. And maybe that's a weird take. But there was a point in this game where I thought the Chiefs should have taken control in a 2-score fashion, and they just never were able to. And I thought it was kind of unfortunate or unlucky. There was a lot of weird calls in this game, as any Chiefs game usually has. I thought that I thought they just showed more holes than last year. And maybe I'm overreacting, but I thought their receiving core didn't really separate well, didn't really make a lot of plays down the field. There was a lot of short passes or Lamar running the ball. And it works when you're trailing, but on a consistency basis, I don't think this is a team that wants to be playing from behind all that much. I think they're just a limited, kind of flawed team with a phenomenal talent at quarterback and some really good playmakers on defense. Their defense showed more holes in that game to me in terms of the middle field coverage, missing Pat Queen, the speed. They didn't really have the speed to the ball that I thought they had last year, or even the pass. The pass rush played pretty well, I guess. I would say Owe played pretty good. I thought Ajabo, he made a play. Van Noy was kind of quiet. Matabike was kind of quiet. Roquan played really well. Kyle Hamilton was quiet. Marlon and those guys, he made a mistake. But I feel like the Ravens defense was not quite as good as last year or even close. And I felt like the offensive line was terrible. Their offensive line was getting whooped in all facets of the game. And Lamar was just making rare special plays and to keep them in it. And Isaiah Likely was superhuman, which was also nice to see. So we'll see how it develops with Derrick Henry, the run game. They need to figure that out. I liked some things, especially from Lamar running, but I definitely feel like this team is not as good as last year. Now, I have to give them credit because they nearly tied it up and sent it to overtime, against the Super Bowl champs on the road. I have to give them their credit there. But I just felt like this was a sloppy game all the way around. So at number 5, I have the Ravens. At number 4, the Houston Texans. The Texans' offense looked like it could be the best in football this year. And that was my biggest takeaway from this game. CJ Stroud was MVP-level quarterback play. He was making scrambles for first downs on 3rd and 16. He was running around, escaping pressure, making pinpoint throws. When he needed to close the game, he closed the game with a perfect pass to Nico Collins. In the red zone, he was deadly. Stroud was unreal. And then you have the receiving core that they all looked great. I thought Nico looked like Nico Collins, big play, explosive threat. Tank Dell was a little quiet, but I felt like Stephon Diggs was the perfect element. I'm very excited for that element. And the new additions looked great. Like Diggs looked great and Mixon looked phenomenal. The run game looked like it hit a new level this year. And with all the different ways they were running the ball, the handoffs, the different run schemes, I thought it looked fantastic from the offensive line running the ball as well. They were opening up huge holes, and Mixon was making plays in crucial downs and scenarios, red zone, third down as expected. The O-line struggled in pass protection quite a bit. Now, some of that's the crowd noise, the road environment. I think they'll be better at home in that degree, but they definitely struggled with Buckner a lot, but they just struggled in general to protect Stroud. But Stroud is so good at maneuvering and manipulating and finding time and making those throws that I'm not really that worried. And Diggs was really good in the short areas. I felt like the like 5 to 10 range, he was very good. So I love the offense. I thought the offense was fantastic. And the defense, I think they had over 400 yards of 22 first down, something like that. The defense just allowed too many explosives. I thought the pass rush was pretty good when they needed to be, especially Hunter and Fatu Kazi, even Mario Edwards. I thought the linebackers were okay, but they just allowed too many big plays at the corner position. They got ran by, Alec Pierce ran by them. Pittman made a couple plays. Mitchell was open on some plays that were missed. So just too many explosives allowed by the defense. If they can hone in on the explosives, which I think is partly the Colts, right? I think that's partly Richardson being a beast and Steichen being a great play caller with times to prepare. But I also think that's partly a Texan problem. So if they can hone in on that, their offense is so good that I think they'll score like 27 plus on like 99% of teams. So at number 4, the Texans. At number 3, the Detroit Lions, who I wasn't overly impressed with considering their expectation in week 1, especially against the Rams defense that I didn't have huge expectations for entering this game. But they came through with the win, and they survived an awesome quarterback performance by Stafford. So they were able to do that. They were able to overwhelm the Rams when they needed to most in the fourth quarter. They came in as the favorite, and they did show enough flashes from certain areas of their team, like Terrion Arnold at corner, I thought showed flashes, although he was a bit handsy and grabby. I thought that Carlton Davis, showed flashes as well. Marcus Davenport showed some flashes. And then Jameson Williams was like the big story of the game to me. Like Jameson Williams, if they can find that extra element of that offense, and Jameson Williams could maybe even be the leading receiver on this team, that takes this offense to a different level. And even if it's just a fear of his speed by defenses to open up on Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta and Gibbs underneath, that's going to take this offense or this team to a next level in terms of explosiveness. Now, I was disappointed by the play of St. Brown. He looked invisible out there. Sam Laporta, I thought Gibbs had a good game. Montgomery had a good game. The O-line had a good game. Goff was a bit spotty early, but they survived Stafford. They survived Kupp and that renaissance, and they were able to come through. So I have them at number 3. At number 2, I have the Chiefs. I did have the Niners as number 1 before the preseason, right before the preseason started. I'm kind of sticking with it. I felt like one team was better than the other in week 1. So, basically how these teams play in a given week, I'll rank one above the other, right? But the Chiefs, I felt like were sloppy in their first week performance. From a pass protection standpoint, I thought they were pretty sloppy. Jawan Taylor was just bad. And the left tackle, the kid, Kingsley, was not great. They had a lot of false starts and things that were a bit iffy. Kelsey looked kind of slow. He made a couple plays, but he did look a little slow. Rice looked great. Worthy looked great. That's really promising. Pacheco didn't do much. I was expecting more from their running game. The interior O-line was as advertised. Mahomes was Mahomes. He didn't have his best game ever, but he certainly wasn't bad. The defense, I thought the D-line played really well. I thought Chris Jones played phenomenal. I thought that George Karlaftis had a good game. I thought their D-line played really well. Their linebackers played really well. I thought that Leo Chanel was really good in this game. And their young corners stepped up to a pretty big degree. Justin Reed struggled a little in coverage against Likely, but Likely's a beast. McDuffie did a good job on Flowers. I thought their defense looked pretty similar to last year. Maybe not quite as overwhelming in the secondary without L'Jarius Sneed, but overall pretty close to the same defense. So that's nice. It would have been nicer if they allowed a little bit less yards, but yeah, the Chiefs they were sloppy, but they were still able to get it done. I wish they just would have kind of dominated in the middle of the game. They had a chance to, and they just weren't quite able to. But give the Ravens their credit. At number one, a team that did dominate is the 49ers. So the 49ers look thoroughly dominant on the ground, on offense. Purdy, against one of the best pass defenses in football, was very efficient with his passes. Shanahan was dialing it up to Hughes check and Kittle down the field open. Ayuk was a little rusty. He should have had a touchdown. He dropped it, but he still looked like Ayuk. And Debo looked as good as ever, so that's awesome. And Mason looked like a legitimate starting running back. Their O-line also played as good as I've seen them play in the last 3 years. Like, that's a problem for teams if that's the case. Like, McKivitz looked really good for the most part. I thought Pooney, their rookie, looked really good, and we know Trent's really good. So I thought the O-line actually looked really good against a good Jets front. Quinnen Williams was kind of invisible, and that's a good sign. And the defense looked faster. I thought that overall the coordination of their defense, the play calling of their defense was better. They played, a little hints of man coverage at times. They look better at corner with Isaac Yiadom. They will be getting pieces back as well. I thought Devondre Campbell filled in admirably, but Dre Greenlaw's going to come back. Hufanga's going to come back. Even guys like D. Winters didn't play. Geeter Gross-Matos didn't play. Nick Bosa looked like Nick Bosa. I thought Malik Collins had a great game. Leonard Floyd had a very good game. So those new additions looked like they fit right in. That's great because last year that wasn't necessarily the case. So, yeah, the Niners just dominated in all three facets, and their offense looked like it did last year without Christian McCaffrey, which is huge. So, at number one, the Niners. And those are my power rankings after week one, entering week two. Thank you guys for watching. It's Mitch. Gronk, spike the like button, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Look out for my best bets and my picks coming on Wednesday. Peace.